How you doing, guys? Good spring break? Yeah? I hope so. Could I answer any questions for you before we get started today? All right. So we've got Satellite Lab due tonight? Yeah. And then the next one, what is the next lab? What's the subject of it?
The CRUD.
Yeah, the CRUD, but what are we CRUDing? Books? Can't even remember now. Lightsabers? No, we did lightsabers as an example. I should probably know this.
Television episodes.
Oh, that's right, television episodes. Okay, so that one's doing about a week still. Okay, I think we're pretty much ready for it. So it's sitting out there for you to work on. So I haven't posted anything new. Everything that's out there is the same things that was out there before spring break. To kind of get back into the swing of things, what I was thinking we might do today, since we've basically talked about our models, our views, and our controllers, everything essentially except routes, is I thought we might go ahead and go through and build a multi-model little CRUD setup. Basically just a little web application with multiple models in it, just sort of for practice, so we could work with the models, we could work with the controllers, we could work with the views, get back into the swing of things, and if we're lucky, maybe run into a few things that we maybe haven't seen before. Right? The subject I was thinking maybe we would play with is the idea of gadgets. I don't know about you, but I like gadgets. I collect gadgets, it seems like sometimes. So what I was thinking was we might create an application that had two different models. There would, of course, be a gadget model, where I was thinking we could keep track of like the name of the gadget, how much it costs, when I acquired it, a description of it, right? And then sort of a categories for gadget. I was thinking we could do like a gadget type table, right? A gadget type model, so we could have like phones, and then all the different phone gadgets would go into the phone gadget type group. Does that make sense? So essentially, we're talking about a one-to-many relationship, right? Each gadget group would have many gadgets in it, and each gadget would belong to a gadget group, a gadget type, right? So let's go ahead and start with that idea. I'm starting off here on my desktop. I have nothing at the moment, so let me start by creating a new project. I'll say Rails new gadget example. Gadget. Gadget. G-A-D-G-E-T. Isn't that gadget? Don't let me start off by misspelling anything that bad. All right. All right, there we go. I'm going to switch over to my gadget example directory once it's generated. Let me go ahead and pull it up in my editor. Okay. And let me go ahead and start by generating my first model. Right? Since gadgets themselves are going to be dependent on the group, the gadget type, let me go ahead and make the gadget type setup first. So I'm going to do a Rails G model for gadget type. And let's say every gadget type just has a name, which is a string. There we go. I'm going to jump back over to my editor. I'm going to go to that newly generated model file. And I'm going to say that for my gadget types, we're going to validate the name for presence. So name can't be blank for a gadget type. Okay. Back over on my terminal, I'm going to do a rake db migrate. Oh, I misspelled migrate. There we go. That'll get my database set up to where it needs to be. And at that point, we basically have the data handling portion of what we need to be able to have gadget types. Everybody okay so far?
Did you validate its presence true?
Yeah. Presence true for the name. All right. Now I can't, of course, actually do anything with these from the web until I have views, and I can't actually access the views until I have a controller. Right? So let me go ahead and generate the controller, and if I do it the right way, it'll at least get me started on my views. So I'm going to say Rails G controller. Create a new controller for gadgets. And I'm going to tell it I want an index, a new, and an edit page. I'm not going to do the show page. Well, maybe I will, now that I think about it. I'll do index, show, new, and edit. Those are the 4 user visitable pages that I'm going to want to have. I was thinking about leaving show out because the only attribute of a gadget type is the name. So it would make for a very interesting show page. Really not a lot of point in it. But then I was thinking if we associate gadgets with it, it might be interesting to have the gadget type show page show all the gadgets in my database that are of that type. So if we went to gadget type phone, we could see a list of all of our phone gadgets or something like that. All right, so let me go ahead and hit enter. All right, generates that controller for me. All right, gets me started on my views. Before I do anything else with that controller, though, I'm going to need to pay a little bit of attention to my routes. If I go over to my routes DB file under the config directory, the generator automatically added 4 routes in here for me. Basically just enough to be able to get to index, show, new, and edit pages. I don't actually care anything about those. Oh, you know what? I did that wrong. I created a gadgets controller. That should have been a gadgets type controller, shouldn't it? Bummer. Let me go back over to the console and let me say Rails destroy. Controller, gadgets, index, show, and new. Index, show, new, and edit. Basically undo what I just did. Okay. My routes file has had those 4 lines removed. Hopefully everything else has been removed too. Under controllers, the controller itself is gone. Under views, the view directory is gone. So yeah, it looks like it cleaned up after me real well. Let me go back and recreate that controller again, but this time let me call it GadgetTypes. As I should have in the first place. There we go. Okay. Alright, now in my routes file, I have 4 automatically generated routes in there, which we haven't talked about yet, but they're there. What I want to do is I'm going to get rid of those. And in their places, I'm going to put in resources, gadget types, this one line basically will replace the 4 that were put in there automatically by the generator, plus give me a few other extras that I'm going to end up needing. Essentially, if I have this in here, then we keep working essentially according to the plan, the way we've been doing it, where we have those 7 basic actions in our controller: index, show, new, create, update, edit, and destroy. Then this will basically take care of all the routing stuff we need just by having this one little bit in there. Right? I can check that out if I go back out to my console, and if I do rake routes, it'll show me all the routes that exist. And it looks like I've got pretty much everything in there that I need. This will also give me the convenience of being able to use some short method names, so I won't constantly be having to do controller this and action that. Right? It'll be a little bit more convenient that way. I would imagine the routes are still very much probably a mystery, at least to a certain extent. I know in certain examples I do it one way, and in other examples I do it another way. Right? I'm sorry about that. Hopefully it won't be too much longer before we talk about routes, and hopefully be able to shine a light on how that's all been working. Okay? Okay, so anyway, routes are set up, model is set up, controller is all ready to go. Got my views ready to go. Let me go ahead and pull up my controller, and let's just start by seeing if we can get the index action going. The index action in my gadget types controller, I essentially just want to give me a list of all the gadget types. So I'm going to create an instant variable, GadgetTypes. To actually get those types, I'm going to do GadgetType.all. At the moment, we don't actually have any gadget types to show. So let me just dip into our console real quick. I'm going to do Rails C. And let me just create a gadget type real quick. GadgetType.create. I'll create a new gadget whose type is phone. There we go. If I do GadgetType.all, I see my phone type in there. So now there should at least be something to see. I'm going to go ahead and exit out of the console. And I'll go ahead and start up my server. Rails S. Okay. And then over to a browser. Let me go to localhost 3000 / GadgetTypes. No route. Oh, I misspelled it again. There we go. And I'm getting my index page. Good. Any questions about anything I've done so far? Okay. Let's go ahead and get that index view working then. I'm going to go to my index view file. Let me just set the title up here, the H1 to gadget types. I'll get rid of this paragraph saying which file it is. And let me go ahead and make use of that gadget types instance variable I created for myself in the controller. I'll do @GadgetTypes each do type. These gadget types are pretty simple. Maybe I'll just display them as an unordered list. Doesn't even seem like I really need a whole table for them, does it? Let's do an ordered list. For each individual gadget then, or each individual type, I'll do a list item. And there I'll just display type.name. So show the name of that particular type. And there we go. There's the phone that I added. We're in business. Okay. Most of the setup work's pretty much out of the way. It's really just a matter of filling out the rest of the controller actions and the views now. Okay. Let's go ahead and hit the show page. The show page will be a pretty simple one. Let me take where I just displayed the name of a particular type of gadget. Let me turn that into a hyperlink by using my link to helper. I'll leave type.name as the actual link text, and I'll just put in type as who we're linking to. Because of that resources method that I called in the routes file, I can just give it the actual object right here, and it'll automatically link to its show page. So phone becomes a hyperlink. When we actually click on it, it'll try to take us over to the show page, and it'll pass the ID. So I've got a 1 up there, the ID of my phone type. Okay. Back over in my gadgets controller then, in the show action, I can retrieve a particular gadget type. By saying GadgetType.find based on the ID parameter that was passed to this page. You like parentheses in there? Okay. Using that gadget type instance variable, then I can go over to my actual show view template, and maybe as the H1 up at the top, I'll just put in the name of that particular gadget. So at GadgetType.name. Maybe down at the bottom I'll put in a link to go back to the index page. So I'll say link to back. And for the actual URL, I'm going to put in GadgetTypes path. And remember, you can go out to the command line and you can run rake routes to find these different methods. So how did I know that GadgetTypes path would be the one that I wanted? Well, if I run rake routes, where I wanted to link to was to the index for my gadget types, which is right here. Okay. So I see that the name that I can use in place of that is gadget types, and then you can just put underscore path at the end of it if you just want a regular old path, or underscore URL after it if you want a full-blown URL for it. So back in the browser, my show page now looks like that. Click the back link and it takes me back to my index page for my gadget types. Okay. Ready to work on the new page? Back over on my index page, let me put in a hyperlink to take me to the new page. I'll link to new gadget type. For the actual path, I'll do new gadget type path. Again, on the command line, if I'm wanting to get to the new action for my gadget types, which is right there, I can see the name of the method it gives me is new underscore gadget underscore type. Again, I just put underscore path at the end of that, and that'll give me the right path to get to that page. So I've got my new gadget type link. If I click it, it takes me over to my new page, as it is right now. Going too fast? Too slow? Want me to go faster? Okay, maybe not faster. I'll just keep going like we've been. Okay. The actual new page itself, of course, is just text right now. Primarily what I need on my new page, though, is I need my form. If we think ahead one step, we're going to realize that we're also going to need that exact same form over on the edit page, right? So instead of creating the edit form directly on the new page, let me create the edit form as a part of a partial, or as a partial, so that we'll then be able to use it on both the new page and the edit page when we get to it here in a minute. So under my views gadget types directory, I'm going to go ahead and make a new file. I'm going to call it underscore form.html.erb. What did I just do? I hit the wrong key. I think I closed my editor. Okay. For the actual form itself, let me make a series of divs. I'm going to give them classes, class of field. Right. The form for a gadget type will be very simple because gadget types only have a single attribute, right? Their name. So inside there, let's put in, oh, I forgot the actual form itself, didn't I? Let's start by doing form 4. Form for gadget type. Do F. End my form down here. There. Once that's done, inside my little field div that I've created, I can then do f.label, ask it to create a label for the name field for me. I'll also do f.text field for name, so there'll be a text field for the name. I'm going to create a second div. I'm going to give this one a class of action. And here I'll do f.submit, so it'll create a submit button for me. That should essentially be all I need for the form for a gadget type. If I go back over to my new page now, I'm going to change the H1 up at the top so it says new gadget type. And instead of the paragraph that's in there now, let me say render form. So it'll load my partial. And I'm going to put a link at the bottom that says back. That'll take me back to the index page in case I change my mind. So gadget types path. If I go over to my new page now, I get an error. Undefined method model name for nil, pointing at line 2. Right? Line 2 of my partial is where I'm trying to do at gadget type. And the problem is right now I'm not supplying a gadget type object for the form to be able to base itself on. So I need to go back over to my gadget controller. In the new action, I'm going to create a gadget type instance variable there by doing just gadget type.new, so a brand new empty unsaved gadget type object just there so that it can be fed to the form so the form knows what it's working with. Back over in the browser, hit refresh, and now it's okay, except for some horrible layout. Is that just a browser bug, or is that something I did wrong in my code?
It was a browser bug last time.
Was it? Oh, wow, it looks so bad. Okay. All right, let me give it a try and see if it actually works. If I say I want to create a new gadget called a tablet, and I create gadget type, no create action. So the form is expecting there to be a create action that will handle the actual creation of the object. Right? And currently, it doesn't exist. So I need to go back over and visit my controller. In my controller, I need to create a create action. And from before spring break, you might remember that the way the form is going to work is it's going to submit to us a params array. And inside the params array, there's going to be a sub-hash called GadgetType, same name as the model. I can use that to create a new object of that type. So GadgetType.new, and I'll pass it that sub-hash from the params hash. That'll give me a new gadget type. And then I essentially want to save it. So at GadgetType.save. Right. I'm going to make that save, though, a part of an if statement because I want to react slightly differently based on whether it saves correctly or not. If it does save correctly, right, if save returns true, then I want to redirect over to, let's say, the show page for the gadget type. Right? So I'm going to do a redirect to, and I'm just going to say redirect to that gadget type. It should interpret that as meaning its show page. If save fails, I want to stay right on the new page. Right? I don't actually need to call the new action again. All the new action does is supply this gadget type variable, and we've already got a gadget type variable right here in create. So we don't need to redirect to the new action. Instead, all we really need to do is re-render the new form. Right? So I'm just going to say render new. Let me see if it works. Back over on my new form, tell it to create a new gadget type called tablet. I hit create, and look at that. I'm at the tablet show page. If I click back, I'm back at my list, which now includes both phone and tablet. Looks like it worked like a charm. What happens, though, if we break it? What if I try to create a new blank gadget type? Remember, we set up a validation on gadget type so the name can't be blank? Right? Well, if I try to leave the name blank, I stay here on the gadget type page. Nothing really shows up, though. Right? It did do its work. You might have noticed the repositioning that occurred because of an extra little div being thrown in there to indicate that that field has an error. But I'd really like to actually show the user the errors. So let me go back over to my form partial. In my form partial, let me go ahead and put in that little bit of code that I need in order to be able to actually show any validation errors that might have occurred. Let's start off by saying if at gadget type errors any, if there are any errors, and an end to go along with that if. If there are any errors, I'll create a new div called error explanation. Inside of it, maybe I'll put in an h2. I'm going to pluralize. Which I can't seem to spell. Yeah, that looks better. For my number, I'm going to go to my gadget types. Errors and count them, and the word I want to pluralize is the word error, so it'll say 1 error, 2 errors, something along those lines. And then also there inside that h2, after that pluralized word error, I'll say kept this type from being saved. Then I'm going to do an unordered list. In the unordered list, I just want to show the individual errors. So let me do at gadget type dot errors, dot full messages each do for message. For each one of those, I'll create a list item, and I'll show that message. A lot more work than it used to be in the old days. The saving grace, though, I suppose, is that now that we've done this, it's done. So we've got it now, because it's a part of our form partial, for both the new and the update page. Jump back over to my browser, hit refresh. There we go. One error kept this type from being saved. Name can't be blank. So now I'm seeing the actual error message. So that's good. If I don't leave the name blank, say a new gadget type called calculator, it looks like that worked. So now I have 3 types. All right, so we can view our gadgets and our gadget types in 2 different ways. We can create new gadget types. How about editing our gadget types? That ought to be a pretty quick and easy one, relatively. Oh, wait, there's one other thing with new that I wanted to do. When I do actually create a new type, let's say a new keyboard, right? When it takes me back over and shows me the show page for the new type, it'd be nice if there was a little message there that said the new type has been created. Okay, that plays into that flash business, that flash hash. I believe we talked about last thing right before spring break. Okay. In order to get that working, I'm going to go back to the create action in my controller. When I do a redirect to the gadget type, that's the line that takes me to the show page. I'm going to say, along with redirecting, also store a notice, and I'll have the notice say, the new type has been created. So that's putting a value into the flash hash in the newfangled way, which we couldn't use last time because we weren't using the nicer resource paths, the nicer resource routes that we're using this time, but it should work okay here. So whenever that line triggers, not only are we going to redirect to the show page for that gadget, but that notice will also be set. Back over on my show page then, up at the top, or wherever it is that I want it, maybe not above the H1, I'll put it between the H1 and the backlink. Okay. Maybe right in this area. I'm going to say if flash notice. So if there's something, if there's a flash notice to show, then maybe I'll create a new paragraph. I'll give it a class of flash and of notice. And inside that paragraph, I'll put in flash notice. Once I access it there and display its value, Rails will automatically wipe it out, so it shouldn't show up a second time. Let me see if it works. If I go to create a new gadget type, my new gadget type is going to be webcam. I hit create gadget type. There's my flash message. If I hit refresh, or if I leave this page and come back, let me leave the webcam show page, go back to the webcam show page, the flash message isn't there anymore. It was wiped out for me, as it should have been. Need me to go back to any of those parts?
Can you go back to the where it shows the error? If there's an error with it.
There we go. On the form partial?
Yes. Is there anything after message that we're worried about?
Just closing up the ERB tag.
I get the error wrong number of arguments.
On that line?
On the extracted source around line number 9.
Wrong number of arguments.
Oh. I got it. Yep, I had messages, so messages. Ah, okay.
Good. All right. Anything else? You ready to edit? Okay. Let's start off on the index page then. Put in an update link for each one of our gadget types. So I have this ordered list of gadget types where I have a link to their name. Let me also add in there then, maybe inside a set of parentheses, another link. I'll make the link text edit. And for the actual URL, I'll do edit gadget type path. That didn't work. No route matches. Did I misspell something? Doesn't look like I did. Edit gadget type. EDIT, GAD, GET.
Do you have to path on the end?
What's that?
Do you have to path on the end?
I do. Don't I? Underscore path right there. What am I missing? Oh, you got to tell it which gadget you want to edit. Which gadget type. I have to pass it the type. That's probably what's wrong. Over in that rake routes that I was pointing out to you before, whenever it shows an ID as part of the generated URL, that ID has to come from somewhere. So it has to know what gadget it is that you're wanting to go to that particular URL for. So now in the browser, my edit links show up. Okay. If I click on edit for keyboard, it takes me over to the edit page as it should. Right? My edit page just isn't what it should be quite yet. So let me go to the edit page. I'll change the heading to be editing gadget type. Here in the middle, we already have our form created, so I'll just say render form. My paragraph down at the bottom, I'm just going to put in a link to go back to the home page. If I look at my edit page now, right, it's upset about errors being called on nil on line 2 of the form. Right? That's where I'm trying to call errors on @GadgetType. So just like when we were working on our new page, the edit page needs to be given a gadget type. Right? So we need to go back over to our controller in the edit action, I need to get a gadget type for it. This time the gadget type isn't just an empty new one, it's specifically the gadget type for the ID that was passed. So I'll say gadget type find params ID. So get the ID parameter that was passed, use that to find a gadget type, turn that into an instance variable, and that's what the edit form can then make use of. Which allows it to go ahead and take the attributes of that particular object and go ahead and populate the form with it. So when I go to my edit page, it already has the name of the editing gadget in there, the gadget that I'm editing filled in. I can't actually update the object yet, though. When I try to submit that edit form, we'll quickly find out that it expects for there to be an update action inside the controller. So before I can actually update my gadgets, I need to add an update action in my GadgetTypes controller. The actual update action in the controller would be a lot like the create action was. It's going to be passed the params hash. Inside the params hash, there's going to be a gadget type subhash. What I want to do is I want to use that in order to update the gadget type. Right? The gadget type that I update, right, is the one that's based on the ID, so the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to retrieve that gadget type. So I'm going to start by saying gadget type equals gadget type find, that should be a lowercase y, params ID, so essentially the exact same thing I did for edit. But then I'm going to use this params of new data to update that gadget type. So I'll do at gadget type, update attributes, and I'll pass it the hash that came in from the form. Now that update attributes will either succeed or fail, depending on whether the updates are valid or not. Right? We can't update a gadget type and wipe out its name, for example. Right? If the update succeeds, then I want to show the user, take them to the show page for that gadget. If it fails, I want to leave them on the edit page. So very much like in the create action, I'm going to say if update attribute succeeds, then I want to redirect to that gadget type show page, and I'll also go ahead and pass along the notice the type has been updated. We already have the code in the show page to handle displaying that notice. You notice how things get a little bit easier the further into it you go? The more of that foundational code you lay down, like getting your form and your error handling and your notice displays set up. Once it's done, it's done. Since everything's set up in this nice modular, reusable way. If the update attributes for the gadget type fails, then I just want to leave them on the edit page, so I'll just say render edit. They'll just be sitting there looking at the edit page, which when it re-renders should also show any validation errors up at the top. That code's already written. Okay, so if I want to change the spelling of my keyboard type to mouse, if I update, mouse is what I get now. Flash message says the type has been updated. If I go back and look, right, keyboard is now spelled M-O-U-S-E. If I try to edit again, and let's say I wipe out the name, It catches the fact that I made it invalid, did not save it, gave me an error message, and I can change it to whatever I'd like. Update. There we go. We've got working edit. The only thing we're missing at this point is the ability to delete the types. Before we dig into that little bit, everybody okay? Okay. Back over to the index page again then. Inside that set of parentheses with my edit link, let me also then go ahead and put in a destroy link. Destroy links are always a little bit funny. You have to be careful with them. So they're always a little bit different than everything else. I'm just going to say link directly to type, which is the same exact way we did the link to the show page right up here. As a matter of fact, if I leave it that way, okay, what will happen is if I click a destroy link, it'll just take me to the show page. They're essentially the exact same thing. The show link, which is the name of the gadget type itself, and the destroy link. What makes the destroy link here a bit different is that instead of it being a get request, I need to turn it into a delete request. So as a third argument to that link to helper, I'm going to put in method delete. Changing the type of the request will change the way that Rails handles it. So instead of it taking us to the show page, it should take us to the destroy action of the controller, which, by the way, we haven't actually written yet. So we'll need to do that before we can reasonably expect for this to actually work. But just because it doesn't work doesn't mean we can't go ahead and click on it. If I click on destroy for keyboard, I just get an unknown action destroy. So it is looking for the destroy action in my controller, which is just what I would expect it to do. So back over in the controller, let's add that destroy action. So a new method in my controller called destroy. It essentially just needs to retrieve that particular object and then destroy it. So I'll say gadget type find for the ID parameter that's passed. Once we've found it, I can then call its destroy method, destory. I always do that at least once, don't I? That kills the thing, wipes it out of the database. Then what?
Does it automatically cascade down if there's multiple things connected to it?
Only if we've set that property. By default, no. But when you do a has many, you can specify the destroy behavior. The dependent, I think they call it the dependent attribute. So you can say dependent destroy or dependent set nil or something like that. I'd have to look up the exact values you can use. But yeah, it's something you've got to kind of turn on if you want that to happen. So once we do actually have gadgets that belong to our types, yeah, if we went and destroyed a type, would we want it to destroy all the gadgets that were a part of that category? Yeah, that's where we would need that. Okay. Last thing we need to do with destroy here, though, is once we've destroyed it, we have to say what's going to have to happen as far as the view, the response to the user goes. We can't leave them just sitting there staring at nothing. So let me redirect them back to, let's go to the gadget types path, back to the index page. And let's pass along a notice that says the type was destroyed. Little bit of a hiccup right there because I'm trying to pass a flash notice to the home page, to the index page, which does not currently have the code on it that needs to be there for displaying notices. The only page right now that we have set up to display notices is our show page. So over on the show page, I have this little bit of code right here for displaying notices. I could copy and paste that over to my index page. Right? But of course, then if I ever wanted to update how that was done, I would have to remember there was a copy of it in 2 different places. So what would be much better would be to turn that either into a helper or a partial. Right? In this case, I think a partial would be a good way to go. Right? Right? Now this particular partial is one that I also might be able to use again when I do the gadgets themselves. Right? When I actually go back through, make a second pass at this, and we add the second piece of data, the second model, the actual gadgets that belong to the types. Right? Those are also going to need to have the ability to be able to display these flash messages. So when I'm going to take this flash handling code, instead of putting it into a partial here in the GadgetTypes folder, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to create a new folder under Views. I'm going to call it Shared. And under Shared, I'll create a new file there called _notice.html.erb. And into that file is where I'll put that code for showing flash notices. Which means back over on my show page then, instead of having that code there, I can just say render shared notice. Whenever you want to access a partial outside the current directory, just have to give it a path as if you were coming from the Views folder, Views directory. Back over on my index page then, I can also render the notice there. So now my show page and my index page both ought to be able to show flash notices. So when I destroy, hopefully we'll be able to see that notice pop up on the index page when we redirect back to it. Uh-oh. When I refresh my index page, it tells me I have a missing partial, shared/notice. Notice, shared, SHARED. HTML.erb. What did I do wrong? Oh, I see what I did wrong. When I created my partial, I didn't put it actually into the shared folder. It's just out there in the main view folder. Come on, you. Drop into that folder. Ah, it's always so stubborn about doing that in this version of TextMate. Let's see, desktop, gadget example, app, views. See, there's where I accidentally created that partial. It should have been here in this folder. Drop it in there instead. So now under shared, let's see. Yeah, now it's working. Okay, so if I go to destroy the keyboard, couldn't find destroy. Did I misspell it? Destroy, yes I did. Let me try that again. Let me try destroying keyboard. Bam, keyboard disappears, the flash message popped up. It says the type was destroyed. Looks like we've got it. Got the full CRUD set up for gadget types. Cool. That get us back into the swing of things? Do you have questions about it? All right, before we dig into actually adding the gadgets to this, there's another neat little feature of controllers that I wanted to point out to you that we haven't discussed before. Right? What it essentially has to do with is being able to create your own API. You know what an API is? Application Programming Interface. It's basically the inputs that can be sent into and the expected responses that can be gotten back out of an application. Not every application has an API. Right? Some applications are sort of fully self-contained and are never really set up to be able to be used from any kind of external, in any kind of external way. Right? A lot of websites are that way. A lot of websites, basically, you give them a URL, probably by clicking on a hyperlink on that website somewhere, and you get an HTML page back, and that's kind of the end of the story. If we wanted to, that could be the end of the story with our Rails apps as well. That's basically what we have right here with our gadget types. Right? We give the user the hyperlinks they need. They can click those hyperlinks. Those hyperlinks provide the correct inputs to our application. Our application then gives the correct outputs back, usually in the form of HTML pages. Right? And if we wanted to, we could say, fine, that's it. Right? But there's a lot more that's potential. There's a lot more potential there. There's a lot more that's possible that could be done, potentially. All of a sudden, I'm hung up on that word for some reason. I don't know why. Okay? Let's say, for example, we wanted to write a desktop version of our application. We create the website. It's a smashing hit. Everybody loves our incredible management of gadget types, and they like it so much they wish that there was a native desktop client for it. Well, with the desktop client, what do? Does it have its own separate database from what that user has always done online? Well, probably not. We don't want to maintain two databases. It would be nice if that desktop client had the ability to communicate with our web app, right? So essentially, the desktop client could somehow send in a signal to the web application, and then the web application could send back the data that the web application had asked for. Right? Maybe an easier way to think about this would be, let's say we were going to create a native iPhone app for our gadget management application. Maybe the gadget management application has already existed as a website, right? But users have been clamoring for a native phone version, a native mobile version instead of just a web version. Right? Well, if somebody has a lot of gadget types or a lot of different gadgets, there's the possibility that on a phone that database might not even fit. Right? Duplicating the database and having it locally available on the phone might not even be an option. So maybe what we would have to do is we'd have to create a native iOS application that communicates with the database that powers the website. So basically the phone application would need to be able to send in signals requesting different things. Show me this gadget, show me that type, update this, create that, all of those sorts of things. And then the web application would carry out all that work in the database, gather up whatever data the phone app had requested, and then would send it back to the phone application, which could then render it according to its own layout. Right? If we wanted to be able to do something like that, if we wanted to be able to have third-party or external sources, however you want to think of it, be able to communicate through and use our web application, Rails makes it relatively easy for us to set that up. Right? The actual inputs, for example, that need to be sent into our Rails app to get it to carry out actions are done. We've done them. Right? Essentially, our Rails app by default is automatically set up to be what they call RESTful. It's been a while since I've mentioned that. Right? But RESTful essentially means that certain patterns of URLs correspond to certain actions. So all of the URLs that our link-to helper has been automatically building, all of the URLs that our router and our controller automatically reply to are already constructed according to this RESTful philosophy, this RESTful specification. So anybody anywhere in the world can look up RESTful in Wikipedia and could immediately figure out exactly what the URLs would need to look like to send into our application in order to be able to get it to do what it is that they want it to do. Right? The only problem we really have at the moment, right, is the outputs. The inputs are basically already done. The inputs to the application are kind of there just by a given. We didn't have to do anything too terribly special. It's just the way we set it up. Right? The outputs, though, are a bit of a problem. Because right now, the only way our application ever responds to anything is with an HTML page. Right? Now imagine you were writing a little script in JavaScript, and you wanted your JavaScript to be able to retrieve gadget types. So you write a little AJAX handler in JavaScript. It sends in the proper URL to the web application here. The web application then sends back all this nasty convoluted HTML, and the JavaScript has to parse all of that in order to find the actual names of the types. Yuck, that's nasty. We don't want to deal with that. Right? So what we could do in order to make this whole thing better for that kind of situation is we would want to have the ability to have our application send back potentially, optionally, something other than just HTML to every request. Right? So what the basic idea would be here is that when we, for example, go to /GadgetTypes to see a list of all of the gadget types, if we could do something like, say, .json on the end of it, then that would mean we don't want to see HTML, we want to see JavaScript object notation formatted data. Or I could do .xml, and it would send back the same data that's being shown in HTML, but it would put it into XML format instead. So whoever was making the request into the application could get the data back in a format that would work better for them, that would be easier for them to parse and use. You with me so far? All right. What this all generally comes down to then is in the controller, whenever we put in the proper URL, the proper path to go to the index action, our index action executes, and then what happens? Well, because we haven't said otherwise, Rails' default behavior is to go and find an HTML template that goes along with that action. So right now we put in the URL for the index action. It automatically then goes and looks for index.htmlrb, executes it, and that's what gets sent back. Right? But we can exert a little bit of control over that if we want to. Up here in our index action, the way we could do that is we could put in what's called a respond to block. Okay. I could say respond to do format end. Okay. That format object then is something that will automatically be handed over to this block by Rails for us. Okay. And it'll let us know if a specific format has been requested. I can do things like, say, format.html. Okay. If I don't then say what to do about an HTML format, then it'll go ahead and carry out its default behavior, which means it'll go and it'll find index.html.erb. Right? But I can also do things like, say, format.json. If I put in format.json, then what would happen by default is it would look for a view template called index.json.erb. And if I wanted to, I could go ahead and create a file by that name. And if somebody goes to the index page but puts .json at the end of the URL, Rails would then go and use that page, index.json.erb, instead of using the regular HTML version. Okay. Something else, though, that I could also do that would be even easier, if I go out to my command line and start up my console, if I want to grab some gadget types, if I say types equals GadgetType.all, and then I say type.to or types.toJSON, you see what happened there? The big block of data up at the top is all of my gadgets being shown in Rails native format, basically an array of active record models. But when I then took that array, that relation, types, and I called the toJSON method on it, what happened was they were automatically converted into JavaScript object notation, right? With all of the quotes escaped. Right? It's basically at that point a JavaScript object, like a JavaScript hash, in a big array. Right? So if I wanted to be able to do something like have my application be able to respond with JSON data instead of HTML data, the work has actually already been done. I could just put a block in here, and I could just say, if somebody asks for JSON data, then render the JSON data for my gadget types. If I jump back over to my browser and I hit refresh, when I go to my index page normally, it works exactly the same way it did before. Nothing seems to have changed. And that's because when we go to our web browser normally, it's not requesting any specific format of data. When it doesn't request any specific format, it just defaults to HTML. So it's still rendering my index.html.erb page just like it was all along. Right? But if I now go up to my URL and I put .json at the end of it, when I hit enter, now instead of getting back an HTML page, I'm getting back JSON data. Which means that if it was something like a JavaScript script that I had written, we could get the data back in this format, which would be super easy, super convenient for the JavaScript to be able to parse and work with. Right? And we can do this for a number of different types. If I say format.xml, right, we can do basically the same little trick. Right? Active Record automatically knows how to convert active record objects into XML formatted data. So in my respond to block, if I put in format.xml, tell it to render XML for the gadget types relation. When I go over into my browser, if I put .xml on the end of the URL, right, it gives me back everything formatted as XML. All of my types formatted as XML. Pretty neat little trick, huh? Yeah. JSON and XML are both built in. Those two can just kind of happen automatically. We don't have to do anything but this. If we want to do something other than JSON and XML, it might mean we have to write additional view templates. There are other things that we can do with it as well, though. If you go down to your config directory and look under the initializers, I believe it is, the initializers subdirectory, yeah, there's a file in there called MIME types. This is where you can teach it about new types. So if I wanted to, say, have an iPhone-specific version of my site, right, they actually already have the line in there for me where it'll set up a special MIME type specifically for iPhone. Right? I just uncommented that line. If I restarted my Rails app now, what I would be able to do with that is in the respond to block, I could say if the format is iPhone, then I could tell it what to do. So essentially, if it's requested from a regular web browser, I could have one version of the site sent out. But if it was requested from an iPhone, I could have a different version of it sent out. It's not actually a practice that I recommend, but it can be done. I'll comment out that format.iPhone line, and I'm going to re-comment out that MIME type line. So that respond to thing is pretty neat. So there are different sets of respond to instructions that we could put in pretty much all of our different actions. We could tell it how to respond to different formats if somebody requests the index action, how to respond to different types if they request the show action. We could go through and put that respond to in all of those different actions. Not super required, though. Just knowing that it exists is enough for right now. Do you have any questions about the respond to block? Okay. We only have a few minutes left, but let's go ahead and get the gadget part of this thing started. Okay. I'm going to jump back out to the command line. Let me go ahead and generate my gadget model. So Rails G model for gadget. Let's see, the attributes I wanted to do is, let's say every gadget has a name. Let's say every gadget has a description, which is text. I'll say every gadget had a cost, which is a float. I'll say every gadget has a date that it was acquired, which I'll set as a date time. I think that's basically what I want. Name, description, cost, and acquired. Go ahead and hit enter. Generates my model file for me. Let me go ahead and do a rake db migrate. Get my database caught up. Oh, I forgot to associate it with type. I always do that. Forget the foreign key. Now, let me go ahead and fix that. Should we just blow away what we just made? Or should we just fix it? Let's just blow away what we've made. We haven't actually changed it. I'm going to do Rails destroy model gadget. Did you see me sitting there hesitating before I hit enter on that last command? I felt like I was forgetting something. Couldn't remember what it was. Oh, I should really... I misspelled destroy. And you know it's a good thing because I should really roll back my database. Did I mess you up? Okay. Let me do rake db rollback. Undo that last migration so the gadgets table goes away. And then let me do destroy ORY. I can't even remember how to spell it now. Destroy. There. Okay. Now let me generate it again, but this time I'm also going to put in a gadget type references. That'll add the foreign key field that I need to have a model connected to a gadget type. Hit the enter key again. There we go. Rake db migrate again. There we go. Over in the actual model files, for gadget, it already says that it belongs to a gadget type. Inside gadget type, I'm going to say it has many gadgets. I'm also going to put in dependent destroy. That way when I destroy a type, it'll also wipe out all of the gadgets that are a part of that type. If I'm remembering correctly, I think that's right. In the gadget model, my validations, let me say validates name, presence true. I won't require a description. Maybe we'll say validates cost, numericality, true. Have to have a number. Oh, left the S off. Thank you. The date, I'm not going to worry about. That's probably good for validations for my gadgets. Have to have a name, and the cost has to be a number. Let me jump out into my console. There we go. Let me retrieve my phone category type, or my phone gadget type. Let's say where name is like. Phone. Ah, thank you. Okay, so I've got my phone type. Let's make a new gadget then. Let me say gadget create a new gadget whose name is, let's say, iPhone, whose description is iPhone 1 original model. Let's say the cost. Jeez, I don't even want to think about it. Let's say it's 800. I don't remember what it cost, but I remember it hurt really, really bad. Date acquired, I'm not going to mess with on this because it's a pain to put in that format, in my opinion. Let me say that it's a type. It's a gadget type. Is the phone type. Didn't like that, did it? Oh, it's not allowing me to assign gadget type. Let's see. Okay, let's just do it a slightly different way. I won't put in the gadget type right there. There we go. Right. Let me say IP for iPhone is, let's see, that's the first gadget. So there I've got it. And let's say IP dot gadget type right now is nil. Let me say set the gadget type, assign the gadget type to be the phone type. Oh, phone type is not an individual type. I accidentally, because I used the where clause, it's a relation. It's potentially multiple. It's a array. So let me say phone type dot first. There we go. All right. So if I say IP dot gadget type, yeah, it comes back as phone. Gadget type dot name. Okay. If I go to phone type first dot gadgets, looks like it just needs to be reloaded. It's not showing the iPhone in there. Okay. Let me save the iPhone just to be sure. Yeah, I probably just need to reload phone type. But I think we're basically there. We're out of time. Sorry, kept you 49 seconds past. We'll go through more of this stuff for the gadgets on Thursday, right? See if we can't get the CRUD stuff all set up for gadgets. We'll look at some of the interactions then because we have two different models. And we'll keep rolling forward. Sound good? Have a good afternoon.
Table, like gadgets table. It destroy.
Oh, when I backtracked, yeah, I messed you up.
Rid of the table.
Drop the whole database would probably be the easiest thing.
Break DB drop.
Yeah, rake DB drop. Delete the migration if you haven't already, and then just kind of start from that point. Couldn't drop
db/test to this directory. No such file or directory.
Huh. Not sure. Let me come take a look.